Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we'll be going through Richard Dawkins' book, Outgrowing God. It's a beginner's guide, and we'll be kind of exploring the origins of religion and maybe questioning some beliefs we've held for a long time.
Yeah, and maybe even finding some aha moments as we go.
Exactly. So to start off, Dawkins kind of confronts us with a pretty big question right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
He points out just the sheer number of gods that humans have worshipped throughout history.
Yeah, like from ancient deities, like Odin and Thor, the Norse gods.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then to the Egyptians, like Ra, the sun god, all the way to, the Abrahamic god.
It really makes you think, like, what if our idea of God was, shaped by the Vikings? Like imagine, tales of Valhalla and these fierce battles against frost giant.
Totally different, yeah.
It's a huge contrast to the God that we see in monotheistic religions.
And it really highlights how much our beliefs are shaped by, the culture that we happen to be born into.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dawkins points out how a lot of religions will borrow from older belief systems, adapting and evolving over time.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, so like Yahweh, he started out as a tribal god of the ancient Israelites.
Okay.
And then historical events like Christianity becoming, the official religion of the Roman Empire that helped propel him to become, this dominant god that we know today.
So like a historical accident almost.
In a way, yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting to think about, how like these seemingly small shifts can have such a huge impact on religious beliefs.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes you think about how different our world might be if other religions had that kind of political and cultural influence.
For sure, yeah.
So Dawkins then turns his attention to the Bible, specifically the New Testament Gospels.
Right.
He points out these discrepancies and contradictions, and it kind of raises questions about their historical accuracy.
Yeah, like, for example, the genealogies of Joseph, right? The ones presented in Matthew and Luke.
They're totally different.
Yeah, they really are. And then he also talks about, like, the lack of independent historical evidence for a lot of the events that are described in the Gospels.
Right. Like outside of the Bible, there are very few mentions of Jesus from that time period.
Like even Josephus, who was a Jewish historian.
Yeah.
He did mention Jesus, but it was such a brief account.
And vague, too.
Yes, very vague.
Which raises questions, right? Like about whether the stories about Jesus were embellished or distorted before they made it into the Bible.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes you think about kind of modern day myth creation,
right?
Like the whole Left Behind phenomenon.
Oh yeah,
do you remember those books?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The world after the rapture.
Yeah, and they even had those services that would take care of your pets
if you suddenly disappeared.
Yeah,
it's wild.
It's wild how quickly stories can just like capture our imagination,
even if there's not a lot of evidence to support them.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Then Dawkins compares miracles, which are a big part of a lot of religions, to magic tricks.
Like, we've all seen magicians do these amazing things that seem impossible, right? But we understand it's an illusion.
Right.
They're tricking our senses.
Yeah.
And he connects this to David Hume, who was a philosopher back in the 18th century.
Yeah.
And his argument about miracles was that we should always kind of go for the less miraculous explanation for an event.
Because the miraculous is unlikely.
Statistically, yeah.
Statistically unlikely.
Exactly.
He uses the apparition of Our Lady of Fatima as an example.
Oh, right, in 1917.
Yeah, where thousands of people supposedly saw the sun move in the sky.
Yeah, but if that had actually happened, I mean, there would be evidence everywhere,
right,
and the Earth probably would have been destroyed.
Right.
So it's way more likely that, it was a mass hallucination or the story got exaggerated over time.
Right.
Like Chinese whispers.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
And Hume's point is that true miracles, like the ones that you see described in, religious texts, they're so statistically improbable that it makes more sense to assume there's a natural explanation.
That we just don't know yet.
Exactly.
Okay, so that covers the first part of Dawkins' arguments.
Yeah, we've talked about the vast number of gods, the issues with the Bible, and this idea of miracles versus, natural explanations.
Right. And next time we'll dive into more of Dawkins' ideas.
Like how myths evolve and whether you really need God to be a good person.
All right, so join us next time on the deep dive.
Dawkins uses this analogy of the Chinese whispers game to kind of illustrate how stories, especially the ones that get passed down orally over time, can really like transform.
Right. Like think about, when you play that game and a simple phrase can end up completely different.
It gets so distorted by the end.
Hilarious.
Yeah. And this Chinese whispers effect, it happens with stories throughout history. And Dawkins is arguing that it raises, some big questions about the accuracy of those ancient narratives.
Especially the ones we find in, religious texts.
Exactly.
And we can see this myth making happen today, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like with Elvis sightings.
Oh, yeah.
Even though we know, Elvis Presley died in 1977.
Right.
People still say they see him.
Yeah. Or the John Frum cult in Vanuatu.
I've heard of that one. What is it?
So these islanders believe that this American soldier named John Frum is going to return as like a messiah figure. And he's going to bring them prosperity and all this cargo.
Interesting. Where'd they get that idea?
It's kind of this blend of indigenous beliefs and like modern influences.
Oh, okay.
Like the name John Frum probably came from John from America.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And the belief itself might be connected to those cargo cults that popped up during World War II.
Right. When islanders would see soldiers receiving supplies, seemingly out of thin air.
Exactly. And these modern examples, they really show us how quickly myths can develop.
Yeah.
And for reasons that actually kind of make sense. It challenges us to look at, ancient religious narratives with a bit of skepticism.
Yeah.
Realizing that they, too, could have been shaped and reshaped over time.
So Dawkins then asks this question, is the Bible truly good?
Right. And he points to some passages, especially in the Old Testament, that are morally problematic, to say the least.
Like, for instance?
Well, there's the story of Jephthah,
okay,
who makes this promise to God that he'll sacrifice the first thing he sees when he gets home if he wins this battle.
Oh, wow.
And, well, it turns out to be his daughter.
Oh, no.
Raises some serious questions, about, like, what kind of God would actually be okay with that.
Right.
And Dawkins compares, like, the morality you find in the Bible to modern ethical standards.
Which have changed a lot over time.
Absolutely. Like things that were considered totally normal back then. Yeah. Now we would look at them and be horrified.
Yeah. Like the Old Testament, there's a lot of instances where God commands
the Israelites
to, wipe out entire tribes.
Yeah.
That's pretty far from, the image of a loving and merciful God that we hear about today.
Definitely.
It's contradictory for sure.
It makes you think, right? Like, where does our sense of right and wrong actually come from?
Yeah.
Is it religious text or is there something else?
Yeah.
Dawkins thinks that we have this, like, built-in sense of fairness and empathy that's evolved over time, that our moral compass isn't necessarily reliant on, divine intervention.
Interesting. So we don't need God to be good.
Well, that's what Dawkins is arguing, yeah.
Okay. What about the idea that people behave better if they think God is watching?
The great spy camera theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this cosmic surveillance system keeping everyone in check. It's interesting to think about, especially when you consider how much our behavior can be influenced by things we're not even aware of.
Right, like that experiment where people paid for coffee more honestly.
When there was a picture of eyes near the honesty box.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, even though they knew it was just a picture.
Yeah.
It still had an effect.
So maybe believing in God does have benefits for society as a whole.
Potentially, yeah. Even if you're not sure about, the actual truth of it.
Right. It's like if it encourages people to be better to each other,
then maybe there's some value there.
Yeah, it's a tricky question.
Definitely lots of ethical considerations to think about.
For sure, for sure.
Dawkins then dives into evolution.
Okay.
Arguing that it can explain how we got these seemingly miraculous aspects of life.
Like what kind of aspects?
Well, like the complexity of the human eye, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Or how fast a cheetah can run.
It is pretty incredible when you think about it.
Right. Like, what are the chances of all that coming about purely by chance?
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely.
It's like trying to build a watch by just throwing all the parts in a bag and shaking it.
I don't think that would work.
Probably not, no, but that's not how evolution works.
Right.
It's this gradual process, right? Small changes happening over millions of years.
Driven by natural selection.
Exactly. So, like, imagine a cheetah with a mutation that gives it slightly longer claws.
Okay.
That might seem like a tiny advantage, but it could help it catch more prey.
Oh, I see.
Which means it's more likely to have offspring that inherit that mutation. And over time,
it builds up.
Exactly. Those tiny advantages add up, and you end up with these amazing adaptations that we see today.
It's not just like random chance creating something complex all at once.
Right. It's more like building a tower, brick by brick.
That's a good analogy.
Dawkins gives all these cool examples, like the chameleon's tongue.
Oh, yeah, that's a crazy one.
Super fast.
Super fast.
And then there's cephalopods and their camouflage.
It's incredible how they can just blend in.
They're like masters of disguise.
It really does make you think, how did that happen?
And Dawkins is saying it's evolution, this blind watchmaker that's constantly tinkering and favoring the traits that, help organisms survive.
And reproduce.
Yeah, and it's powerful enough to explain all the diversity and complexity of life without needing, a supernatural explanation.
It's a pretty compelling argument.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. Dawkins suggests that evolution might have favored traits like religious belief and altruism.
Wait, so you're saying believing in God could be an evolutionary advantage?
Even if there is no God.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow.
Okay, so think about those early humans on the savannah.
Okay.
The ones who assumed every rustle in the grass was a predator, even if it was just the wind.
Yeah.
They were more likely to survive, right?
Makes sense. Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. So that tendency to see patterns and, make connections, even if they're not always accurate, it could have been helpful for survival. And Dawkins is suggesting that religious belief might be a byproduct of that.
So we might be predisposed to believe.
Even if it's not, literally true.
That's a pretty big idea.
It is, yeah.
Okay, what about altruism?
Like, why would evolution favor being nice to others?
Yeah, especially in a world where, it's all about competition.
Right. Well, think about our ancestors living in these small groups.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's interconnected and helping others, especially your kin.
Yeah.
That indirectly benefits your own genes.
Oh, okay.
So there's a natural incentive for cooperation there.
I see.
And then there's this concept called reciprocal altruism, where, you do favors for others.
Hoping they'll return the favor.
Exactly. Like vampire bats, they share blood with their roost mates who haven't found any food.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And all of these evolutionary pressures.
Plus, our culture.
Right.
That's shaped our moral instincts.
Leading to this, complex system of ethics that we have today.
So basically, we're wired for selfishness and cooperation.
Depends on the situation, I guess.
Yeah.
But the point is, Dawkins is challenging this idea that we need God to be good.
Right.
Our sense of right and wrong, it goes deeper than that. It's embedded in our biology and how we evolved as social creatures.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. In the last chapter, Dawkins kind of encourages us to find this courage in science.
Yeah, he highlights how often scientific discoveries, even the ones that, seem counterintuitive at first, they end up being true.
Right.
And he starts with this crazy fact. Every time you drink a glass of water, you're probably consuming at least one molecule that was once part of Julius Caesar.
Wait, what?
Yeah, seriously.
How is that even possible?
Well, think about the water cycle,
Yeah.
Water on Earth is constantly being recycled.
Through evaporation, rain.
Exactly. Rivers, oceans, the whole thing.
Okay.
And the number of water molecules is so vast that statistically, it's almost certain you're drinking some ancient H2O.
So we're all connected through this shared water.
In a way, yeah, even to historical figures.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
Right. And then he goes on to talk about other scientific truths that seem hard to believe at first.
Like what?
Like the fact that when you fall, you become weightless.
Oh, right. That's why astronauts float in the space station.
Exactly. It's not because they're far from Earth's gravity.
Right.
It's because they're in this constant state of free fall around the planet.
It all makes sense now.
And here's another one. If you could shrink the Earth down to the size of a ping pong ball,
okay,
its surface would feel perfectly smooth.
Really?
Yeah, even Mount Everest would be barely noticeable.
It's amazing how our perception of scale can be so off.
Right. And then there's the fact that the matter that makes up everything, us included, is mostly empty space.
Empty space. But everything feels so solid.
Well, it turns out that atoms, the building blocks of matter, they're mostly empty space.
How does that even work?
So picture an atom's nucleus as a tennis ball.
Okay.
The electrons orbiting it would be like tiny specks, but miles away.
That's crazy.
It makes you wonder what solid even means, right?
Yeah, it really does.
Dawkins also gets into some of the really big questions in science, like the origin of the universe, the laws of physics, things like that.
Yeah.
And he admits that we don't have all the answers yet, but he argues that science has this track record
of explaining things that seemed impossible.
Exactly. So it gives us confidence that we will eventually figure these things out.
It's like a constant process of discovery.
Exactly.
What about the anthropic principle?
Oh, right. The idea that the universe has to be compatible with, observers like us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here to observe it.
Pretty wild thought.
It is, yeah. Makes you think about our place in the cosmos.
For sure.
Dawkins uses the example of the fine-tuning of physical constants in the universe. Like, if those values were even slightly different, the universe as we know it wouldn't exist.
Right.
And some people see that as evidence for, a divine creator.
Yeah.
But Dawkins suggests that maybe it could be explained by the existence of multiple universes.
Multiverse theory.
Yeah, each with different physical laws.
Okay.
So maybe we just happen to live in the one that allows for, life as we know it.
It's a possibility.
Definitely.
So in the end, Dawkins is urging us to
embrace the scientific method.
Yeah, and to have the courage to, question what we think we know.
Even when the answers are weird or make us uncomfortable.
Right, because science has this history of overturning common sense.
And showing us what reality is really like.
Yeah, so it's all about being curious and never stopping exploring, even if it means, facing some hard truths.
Absolutely. Never stop questioning.
So if you're ready to really delve into some of these big questions about existence.
And maybe challenge some of your own beliefs.
Then Dawkins' Outgrowing God it's definitely worth checking out.
It'll make you think.
Yeah, it'll make you think. So that wraps up our deep dive into Richard Dawkins' Outgrowing God, a beginner's guide.
Hope you found it insightful.
Yeah, and maybe even a little bit challenging.
If you're interested in reading the book yourself,
you can find a link to purchase it in the show notes.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics.
Yeah, and be sure to share this episode with your friends and leave us a review if you enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening.